Hey everyone, this is Leo from Practical Data Training, and today we're going to learn about SQL joins. We often need to combine data from multiple tables, and we do that with joins in SQL. So imagine a fictional company that has 7 stores spread across the Northeast and the Southwest. We see New Ipswich, Mason, Greenville, Queen Creek, and some others. And these stores want to start email marketing, so they've been collecting email addresses over here. For instance, store 1001 on 1/5/2020 had 4,010 email addresses. A week later, they went up to 4,035, and then 4,040. Now you'll notice this store ID matches this store ID. That means there's a relationship between email lists in stores where the store ID in email lists is what we call a foreign key, and the ID in stores is a primary key. If you don't know, a primary key identifies a record. It's a unique identifier that only this record has. And the foreign key is just a way you can tell a table that it's related to the primary key on another table. Now if we look at the data, we see 7 stores. We see these email lists that are growing and maybe shrinking over time. And then we have campaigns. So this is someone who actually sent a bunch of emails out with some sort of offer or a coupon. And store 1001 sent a 10% off coupon. And they sent it to 2,500 people. Out of that, 450 opened it and 25 redeemed it. A week later, they tried 20% off, got a little better results. Store 1004 was doing buy one, get one fidget spinners. No one seemed to really care. And store 1005 thought, hey, what if we just give out free candy? Well, that worked pretty well. They only sent it to 50 people. But 42 opened it and 29 came into the store to get their free candy. And hopefully they bought other things as well. So in our fictional company, our fictional manager comes up and says, get me all the stores with email list size and campaign information. Now there's a lot of ways we can interpret that, but we'll take the most literal first because it gives us the most useful and the most common join that we'll ever use, which is a left join. A left join will combine all the rows in one table with all of the matching rows in another table. Logically, what we want to do is start with all of the stores. So let's do that. We're going to take all of the stores and we're just going to copy everything right there. And we know we're going to want to add a date and the total email addresses. So let's just add those columns. And then we're going to want to include the campaign information. We already have date from email lists, so we're going to copy these columns. And then let's color these so they match the tables that we're looking at. So we have date and email lists from our email list table. We'll make that orange. And we have offer sent, opened, and redeemed from the campaigns table. We'll make that green. Now let's remove the data for now. And what we really want to do is we want to show one row of data for each store and every combination of email lists that we have for that store and every combination of campaigns, or at least the campaigns that are on the same date as the email list. So if we start with store ID 1001, we can see here that for this ID 1001, we have a row here with date and total email. So we're going to put that in there. And we also have an offer for that for that date. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Then we have a second row, so let's go ahead and grab that. And we have a campaign there, so let's go ahead and grab that. And we have a third row in email lists, so we're going to grab that as well. And we don't have a third row in campaigns, so let's go ahead and just fill in the store information. And so now what we have is 3 rows of data. The first row, the idea of a first row, comes from the fact that we selected the store. Then we have 3 different dates, so we've copied that information in, and we have 2 campaigns. You'll see here there's nothing here for 1/19/2020, and that's because we have no campaigns. And that's all right, because it's just a null value in most databases. There's nothing to put there. So what are we going to put? Nothing. All right, let's look at store 1002, the Mason store. So we're going to copy that in, and we're going to get its email databases. And 1002, do we have any campaigns? We don't have any. That's okay. There's nothing to put there. We won't put anything there. Oh, we don't have any email lists for 1006. That's interesting. So there's nothing to put here. That's okay. And we'll see later on ways we can deal with that. And now let's look at 1007. Again, we don't have any email lists for 1007, and we don't have any campaigns. Also, look down here. We have email lists for 1009, which doesn't have a store. Since we used the literal translation of get me all stores with email, we started with the stores. So there's no way to see that information in what we're going to do. So now we've shown what a left join will do. It will take the data from one table and match it to any rows in another table or multiple tables that exist. So let's see how we would do this in SQL. So I have this data. We have stores here. We have email lists. And we have campaigns in a database. And there's a script in the description of this video where you can do this yourself. And we see it's the same data. So let's start writing some real code. And if we drag this down a little bit, we know the first thing we're doing is we're selecting from stores. And what are we selecting? We're selecting stores.id, stores.region, stores.location. And I suppose we should put from in here. And when we run that, we're going to see something that matches this table exactly. But that's not very useful because we want the email lists. So now we're going to left join email lists, and we're going to say on email lists dot store ID equals stores dot ID. So what we're saying here, what we're telling the database management system is this column store ID references the primary key, which is the unique ID of an individual store. And what information did we want? We wanted the date and the total email addresses. So let's add that in. email lists dot date, email lists dot total email addresses. We're going to go ahead and run that. And let's see if this looks anything like what we were expecting. We'll go ahead and minimize this a bit. And I see store ID 1001, region Northeast, New Ipswich. The date is 1/5/2020, and total email addresses 4010, 4035, 4040. That looks about right. Look down at 1007. We just have the store, but we don't have any email information. Same with 1006. Yeah, it looks like that's pretty much the same data that we're looking for. Okay. Now, we also want to include the campaigns here. So let's make that a little wider so we can see everything. And so we're going to do another left join. And yeah, that's lined up about right. So now we're going to say left join campaigns on campaigns.storeID equals stores.id. And we're going to add the information we wanted, of course, which is campaigns.offer, campaigns.sent, campaigns.opened, and campaigns.received. That's not received, that's redeemed. And we're going to see a problem here. Notice that we're expecting 3 rows of data for New Ipswich, but we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of data for New Ipswich. And the reason why we have that is because we're telling the database that we want to match every record with store ID 1001. We already saw that when we simply joined the one table for email lists, it returned 3 rows of data for New Ipswich. This table has 2 rows of data for New Ipswich, and so it's joining on each of those rows, which gives us double the number of items that we need. And that's okay. We can fix that pretty easily, because what we really want to do is we want to match on the store ID, but also the date. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to say on campaign store ID equals stores.id, and campaigns.date equals stores, or not stores, email lists.date. Now let's see if that looks any better. Let's go ahead and bring this back up, get things to line up a little bit. We're kind of running out of space here, but that's all right. Now that looks pretty good. Let's see. We have 2 rows for New Ipswich that has all of the information, and they look like they match. We have a lot of stores that didn't send any campaigns, and they won't have any information. You see this null value. We see store 1004 had the BOGO fidget spinner, and that information looks right. I'd say this is pretty good. So now we've joined 3 different tables using a left join, and that allows us to answer our boss's question. Get me all stores with email list size and campaign information by date. Now let's look at a different interpretation we could use. So you're proud of yourself. You got all the stores with email list size and campaign information by date, and you did it with SQL. With a big smile on your face, chest puffed out, you walk up to your manager and you show it to her, and she says, What's this? I can't use this. These stores don't have campaigns, and Mesa and Tempe don't even have an email list. Why would I want them? I need you to show me the campaigns and the emails for the stores. Okay, now it's time to learn about inner joins. While the left join gives all the information from one table and may add additional rows where they exist in other tables, the inner join is going to give us the intersection. Only the data that has a matching ID in all of the tables that we're inner joining. So let's start over here. We'll get rid of these rows. Delete rows. Okay. Let's start down here in the smallest table to see what we're going to end up with. Campaigns has 2 rows of data for store 1001, and it has 3 rows of data in email lists and 1 row in stores. And since we know that the campaigns have matching rows in email lists, the inner join is going to give us 2 records. It's going to give us the store. It's going to give us, if we look down here, we see we have campaigns on 1.5 and 1.12. So it's going to give us this information from email addresses. And it's going to give us these 2 campaigns. Let's go ahead and put those over there and copy this down. So why is it 2 rows instead of 3? Because when we do an inner join, all of the tables that are involved in the inner join will interact. So at most, you're going to have the number of rows in one of the tables that that you're joining to. You're automatically going to get 1 row, or you could get 1 row from this, but the number of rows you get beyond that will be determined by the tables you're joining to. And in this case, since we only have 2 campaigns that match these 2 dates, we're going to end up with 2 rows. Now we also see store 1004 has a campaign. So let's add that in. It also has an email list. Whoop. I did something wrong there. Let's try that again and use Control C and Control V. There we go. And if we look at the campaign, it's on 112 and it has an email list entry on 112, so we can put that in there. And we can put the campaign. And store 1005 has a campaign on 112. It has an email list entry on 112, and it has a store. So let's go ahead and add that in there. And that was on 112, so that would be this record here. And we'll put that campaign. All right, so out of all this data, there's only 4 rows of data where a store ID matches an email list and a campaign, and an email list date equals a campaign date. That is an inner join. And let's see how we can do this in SQL. We'll drag this over here just so we can see it. Don't know why my mouse is being so flaky right now, but we'll leave that. All right. So, like always, we'll start with the first table, which is stores. and the information we want. We want stores.id, stores.region, stores.location. And instead of left join, we're going to inner join email lists on email lists dot store ID equals stores dot ID. Looks like I have a new Calendly event. I'm sure you're happy to know that. And then we're going to inner join campaigns on campaigns.id, store ID equals stores.id, and campaigns.date equals email lists.date. Let's see how that works. Oh, we'll have to add our information in here. So from the email lists, we'll get the date and the total email addresses. And I should remind myself to turn off notifications on my computer and phone when I do these videos, but oh well. Campaigns, we're going to get the offer, we're going to get the sent, and we're going to get opened, and finally campaigns.redeemed. Let's see how this works. Boy, that sure looks like that table. We have 2 rows for 1001. And if I maybe drag this over a bit so we can see more of it, you'll see we completed an inner join and everything matches up as we would expect. Now we can mix join types when we're using more than 2 tables. For instance, what if we wanted an inner join between stores and email lists and then a left join on campaigns? So show us all the stores that have an email database and show campaigns for the ones that have campaigns. I'll spare you the boredom of watching me create the table and just know that this is that table. This is all stores that have an email list, and if they have a campaign, it's added as well. Now, how would that look in SQL? Well, let's go ahead and build it. Start a new query here, and we'll select from stores. We know we're going to left join email lists on email list.storeID equals stores.id. And actually I said left join. That's not correct. We want inner join. And we know that we're going to do a left join on campaigns on campaigns.storeID equals stores.id and campaigns.date equals email lists.date. And if you're wondering why I often fill in this section of the query before I fill in the select list, it's because it allows me to get the autocomplete so I can see what fields are available. So we know we want stores.id, stores.region, stores.location. We want email list.date, email lists total email, and we want the campaign information. Offered, sent, opened, and redeemed. And let's see how this looks. We'll go ahead and drag this over again with even with my flaky mouse settings. We'll drag this over here. And boy, that sure looks like the same exact information, and our query was correct. So what we did here is we joined with 3 tables, but we used 2 different types of joins. The inner join on email lists limited the stores to only those stores that have an email list. And then the left join on campaigns added the campaign information for any of those stores. If we had done an inner join, we would only get 4 rows, and it would be the ones that have a campaign. So you can mix and match joins, and it can get really confusing and complicated at times when you have, say, 5 or 6 or 7 tables. In those cases, we'll get to information like that eventually, but early on, if you focus on left join for most of your work, know that you can join multiple tables. You can do an inner join when appropriate, and you can mix the types of joins. The last type of join we're going to talk about is a full outer join. Now, what if we took the original question, get me all stores with email list size and campaign information by date. We expanded that to be get me all stores, all campaign information, and all email address size by date. That's what a full outer join does. It returns every row from every table, and if there's a matching row in another table, it will join that information on a single row. So if you look at this, we've seen a lot of this data, for instance, stores that have email information but don't have campaigns. But we also ran into a store that had an ID in the email lists, but it didn't actually even have a store or campaigns. And so you see here we have 3 rows, 3 records that have information but don't have a store ID because there isn't a store ID matching in the stores table. Let's see how this would work in SQL. All right, so you should be getting used to this. I'm going to select from stores, and I'm going to do a full outer join on email lists. Now I say we're returning all rows from all tables, but we still want our matching condition, our on statement, so that we know that, for instance, this row of data here matches this row of data. So we'll say on email list dot store ID equals stores dot ID, and full outer join campaigns on campaigns dot store ID equals stores dot ID, and campaigns dot date equals email lists dot date. And we'll go ahead and pull in our information, and let's just make it a little easier, and we'll copy and paste. If I can remember where I was on here. All right. Now we'll drag this over with my flaky mouse that's making this float everywhere. And let's see. Boy, that sure looks like the same information once again. Notice down here we have a whole lot of nulls, and we have the date and the total email addresses that came from store, I believe it was 1009, right over here. And that's because it didn't have a store ID in the stores table. So we could add that in if we wanted to. For instance, we could say stores.id. Let's call this email lists dot store ID, and we'll say as email store ID. And what that does is it gives us a unique identifier for that row. So this would tell us that we need to add store 1009 to our stores table. And this is something you'll commonly do. You'll add in fields you don't necessarily need in the output of your query, but it helps you troubleshoot things. Like if I were looking at this query, I'd say this is a problem. Something's wrong. It's okay that there's no campaigns, but there certainly should be a store. And by adding that ID in, now I know, oh, we're missing store 1009. Maybe that's, I don't know, Albuquerque or something like that. All right. That's the end of this introduction to SQL joins. Remember, you don't learn by watching videos. You learn by taking what you've seen in a video and applying it in real life. Go ahead and get some data that you're working with, or create some data and practice. See where you make mistakes. See where you find something that's really interesting. And keep doing that. You will keep learning. Thank you.